All right. This is from Likuti Sichot's base. Now, this week's Torah portion talks about the red cow, right? That's only how it begins. But there's a lot of very amazing things happen in this week's Torah portion. And one of them is the death of Aaron and the death of Miriam. And interestingly enough, when the Jewish people were in the desert, so they were fed by manna, right? Man. And it says in the Midrash that was in the merit of Moses. And they also had water. There was a big rock that followed them wherever they went, and there was water that came from this rock, miraculously. And that it says it was in the merit of Miriam. And there were these clouds that surrounded them, anane kavod. There were clouds that surrounded the Jews from all six sides, above, below, right, left, forward, back. They were like walking around in this box, so to speak. Because in the clouds, they said they were in the merit of Aaron. And one way we know this is that when Miriam died, the well stopped. That's the whole story in this week's Torah portion where Moses strikes the rock. And when Aaron died, suddenly the clouds stopped. It says then they were attacked by an enemy. And it says that Moses brought them all back. All right, so let's see what this has to do with us. In Midrash Chazal, welche seien verbunden mit der Heinteke Sedra, in the Midrashim of the rabbis which explain this week's Torah reading, Parshat Chukat, read Zecharum as the Anani Kavod seinen Gewen in Aaron Zechus, that the clouds of glory, they came from the merit of Aaron. Then Be'er, says the well of water that went with him everywhere, this was in the merit of Miriam. When the man and the man that fell from heaven is given in Zechus from Moshe. This came in the merit of Moshe. Then Aaron and Miriam, Zayin and Nistalik of Aaron, when Aaron and Miriam, when they passed away, Zayin and Oich, Tzu Genumen, there was also taken away the clouds, these clouds of, what is it, glory that protected them, and Mitten Bear, and also the well. Und Zayin and Nachdem, Tzu Rikekert, says it came back, the well and the clouds returned because the Jewish people couldn't live without water and without protection. They came back in the merit of Moshe. Even though the Torah is a book of wisdom. Like it says, it says the Torah is the wisdom, is your wisdom and your genius in the eyes of the nations, right? There's no book that's like the Torah, even literally speaking. Deswegen, nevertheless, wird es nicht angerufen mit Namen Chachma. The Torah is not called the book of wisdom. Not called the book of wisdom. It's not called the book of understanding. Nor mit Namen Torah, but it's called the book of teaching. Lashon Hora. This means as yeder inyan, that everything which is spoken about in the Torah, this comes to teach us something, an anwesen. Alamol un umuton, a teaching for every time and every place. In Tag Teglich 11, in our daily life. It's not just a religious book, what to do, how to do the religious part of your life. You put a little square or something like that, instead of dividing your life into like your family and your job, and you have your hobbies, and then you have your relaxation. And then, fine, make everything else should just move over a little bit. Make another little square that's called my religion. And then this thing of religion, that's also a part of, right? Some people wrote to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, said, I'm a professor and I'm also a religious Jew. And the Rebbe would write back to them and say, no, you're a religious Jew and you're also a professor. So the Torah is not just another compartment of life, another aspect of life. Rather, the life is an aspect of the Torah, right? It's not a way of life. So ideally, life is just an aspect of the Torah. How many Jews were willing to give their lives for the sake of the Torah? Mitzvahs aseh and mitzvahs lo taseh, there's the positive commandments and the negative commandments. These are a teaching how to live every moment. Nor oich this the sipurim from Torah, the laws of the Torah, they are a teaching in life. They teach us how to live. Varum, because oich di mitzvahs. I'm sorry, what's it? Yeah, this is says I read it a little bit wrong. I should have run this together. So the Torah is not only the commandments which are in the Torah, the positive and the negative commandments. These are a teaching in life, but rather even the stories of the Torah, they are a teaching about how to live. Warum? Because oich the mitzvahs seinen geschrieben, because the mitzvahs were written nit b'derech tzivoy, not in a way of a commandment, nor b'derech sipur, in a way of a story. What does it say? God says to Moses, tell the Jewish people that they should do this. God commanded that you should do this. In other words, the whole Torah it's not, there's a book called the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is a book of commandments. It tells you exactly what to do. The Torah, the whole thing is a big story from the beginning to the end. When they were in the desert, so God took Moses and God spoke to Moses and he said, this is what you should do, and etc. So it was a story that God's telling. As their Eibishter, that God had spoken to Moses, and Moses, he just repeated over to the Jewish people what to say, what to do. Unazoy is the mitzvah, so is all the commandments. Hagam, ze zainen, geschrieben geworden, but they're sipur, even though the mitzvahs, the commandments, were given over in a way of a story. Nevertheless, the commandments are a horah, they are a teaching. Azoy, zainen, oich, the sipurim in Torah, also not just the commandments, but also the stories in the Torah. This is everything in the Torah is a teaching for us in life, because the stories of the Torah, they are a part of the Torah. So here we have this idea of, Moses, he brought in the merit of Moses, there was the manna, and the merit of Aaron, there were the clouds, and the merit of Miriam, there was the well. That's not a commandment. What's it got to do? It's a story, a historical story. And who knows if you can even believe it, right? You really want to tell me the Jewish people wandered around 40 years and that there was a rock that followed them? And that, okay, you're a religious person, so you believe it. Good to stories, but it has no, what does it have to do with my life? Says the Rebbe, that's not the attitude to take. And in fact, it's not true. The fact of the matter is that everything that's written in the Torah, even the most seemingly mundane stories and insignificant, apparently insignificant facts, what were the names of the wives of Esav or of Ishmael? Who cares? These people died 3,000, 4,000 years ago. What do we care about that? But every single thing that's written there in the Torah is somehow or other coming and teaching us a lesson. A lot of the times, the books of Kabbalah, they explain, these seemingly, minute details in some story that's told. They explain it according to very deep Kabbalistic principles. And the Rebbe is saying the same thing, but the fact is not, the Kabbalah is one thing, but the main thing is it affects our life. How is it supposed to affect our life? This fact that Aaron brought the clouds and Miriam brought the well, and when they died, it went away, and they all came back with the merit of Moses. Okay, says the Rebbe, nevertheless, the Torah, in fact, is a teaching. Therefore, Shreip the Rambam writes, as Oich, the Gemara, that also in the Gemara is thus Faran, Baremez, and it's also hinted at in the Talmud as is Nita Kain Chiluk Bein the Pasuk. There's no difference between the sentence, the Achot Lotan Timna, the sister of Lotan was called Timna. This is in the genealogy over there of Esau. Mitten pasuk with the sentence of Shema Yisrael. Hagam, as the Shema Yisrael is the essence of Judaism. This, the sister of Lotan, is Timna. These are totally, by the way, things that God writes in the Torah. Right? It says it's not by the way. Everything that's written there is exactly right. Is exactly holy, in the same level of holiness. Hagam is the pasuk Shema, even though the sentence Shema Yisrael, this is one of the commandments, the main commandments of Judaism. And the pasuk, the sister of Lotan, her name was Timna. This is just a story. Varum, but both of them are important to the same degree because both of these stories that God told Moses the Jewish people should say Shema Yisrael, and both of them are teachings. They're all in the Torah. And Beta Zainin Chachmas of Ratzon Shel Kodesh Baruch Hu, because both of them are the wisdom of God. Unazoi vi ala sipurim, like all the other stories in the Torah, Zayin Horos, Azai is oich the sipur, just like all the stories are a teaching to us. This story also about the well and the clouds are also a teaching. I just spoke to somebody very interesting on Shabbos. He's a Chabad fellow, but he told me that he was brought when he was like 6-7 years old. He started having big questions about life. You know, what exactly is life? Unusual. And mainly what he somehow or other got the question about was, you know, the Bible, is it really true or is it not true? So he asked his father. His father was not religious, totally, as a Jew. And his father said, I don't know, you know, sort of try yourself. So he said he read these other books, and, you know, he read the Gospels, and he read this. And he said, all these books are like they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell you something. Here's this man, he was born, he's pure, he's wonderful, he's amazing, never makes a mistake, he's always right? He's the poor sacrificial lamb, everybody hates him. But he himself is totally pure. And it's like trying to sell you, it's like a car salesman, trying to tell you, and it's advertising, my product is the best, no faults, everything is wonderful, it's got the best mileage, but there. Says, and so it is all of them. You know, it's telling you, it's promising you this, and it's promising you this, and you're going to go to heaven. So he said he read the Torah in English, and he said, this is not trying to tell you anything. You know, and the people have faults, and it even tells you what they are. You know, they have doubts, and there's the conversations, and it's really very strange. You know, the whole thing is really, it's not trying to teach you anything, and it's not trying to sell you anything. He says this is real, and to the degree that he got one of these books, and as the beginning, the Old Testament, the New Testament. Somebody gave it to him. He tore it in half. He was 7 years old. He tore it in half, and he took the other part. He says, "This is not holy. This New Testament, whatever, it's not a holy book." He burned it. He said, "I want nothing to do it." He kept the old one. He said, there's something special about it. So that's the idea of the Torah. It's just telling you what the truth is. Telling you what the truth is. Take it or leave it. And it's not, the truth is not, cut and dried. You do this, you get heaven. You do this, you go to hell. It says to the point that everything in the Torah, even things that have nothing to do with teaching you, it seems at all, everything is coming to teach you a lesson because it's written by God, and the whole purpose of it is to improve a human being, to let a human being know what to do, especially the Jews. So what has this got to do with the clouds and the water and the manna in the desert? The dry and these three things, the clouds of glory, the manna, and the water, seinen verstandig und sie alle seinen voran in Torah. All of these three things are understandable. They're all in the Torah. These are all aspects of the Torah. What does this mean? Let's see. The clouds of glory, What do? They protected the Jews. Magin gewen b'mechutz. They protected the Jews from the outside. They haben Magin gewen from the Daled Ruchos. They protected the Jews from all sides. Geharget and Nechashim, they killed snakes, which were in the desert. Ois gelechne harim says they leveled down mountains. Ois gered in the Levushin, it says that they cleaned, these clouds cleaned the garments of the Jewish people, so they didn't have to worry about cleaning their garments or even changing them, since it made them new. Like it says, like it says, your garment did not even wear out on you. Was das sein and alle inyanim from Magin Zayin Mibachutz. This is, and the clouds protected from the outside. That was the thing of the clouds. Even their clothes, which are also on the outside of a person. The manna that was brought, and the clouds that came from Aaron, right? So the manna that came from Moses is an Indian from Achila. This is food. In them man, in the manna, had men doch gekent feeling all the time. Says they could feel all different tastes. Was men had gewollt, whatever you wanted. Right? The problem with the man was it looked the same all the time. But you wanted to say, I want it to taste like a steak, it would taste like a steak. You want it to taste like a fish, it would taste like a fish. Was their inyan from Achila, the whole idea of eating, it goes inside of a person. Their be'er, the water, the well, was das is mit, which is water. This is water. Is das nit kein davar a mazin mitzad atzmo. Water doesn't protect you, and it also doesn't really nourish you. Water. Therefore, it says, the Rambam says that the reason why you cannot make what's called an eruv. An eruv means you take food. This is for Shabbat. If you want to walk on Shabbat past the limit, it says you're only allowed to walk like 2,000 amos. I don't know, like about 3,000 feet outside of your town. Right? Let's say you live in the middle of a desert. You can only go like 3,000 feet outside of the town. There's the exact laws, but from every side you can go 3,000 feet. What if there's one direction you want to go further? That says you can take food, put it at the end of that 3,000 feet outside of your city, and it's as though that becomes your new city. Now you can go 3,000 feet from that point, but you have to put food there. What if you put wine? Good. Bread? No problem. Water? No good. Water is not good. You can't marv with water. Why? Because when you make an eruv, it has to be a thing that is nourishing. Mayim and water is not a thing that is nourishing. The pu'ula from mayim, what does water do? Water, it distributes the food through the body. Water distributes the food. So these three aspects are also in the Torah. The bread of the Torah, the clouds of glory of the Torah, and how the Torah protects you from the outside, that's the clouds, how it nourishes you, that's the bread, and the water, how the Torah is distributed to all the aspects of your life. We'll see. In the Torah, there's all these three things. As this Faran, thus was Torah git in a panemius, which you take Torah in an inside way. Un as is Faran, this was Torah is magin bechutz. There's also a person who learns Torah, it protects him. Un as is Faran, and there is also in the Torah was Torah trugged farander, that the Torah distributes around both of these things to all the Jews. Every Jew receives the protection and the nourishment of the Torah. That's the water. It distributes it to everybody. Man had geredet frier. We talked earlier that the Torah is the language of teaching, right? That's what we said before. This means, as Torah lent an haga vitzu firen zichen leben. The Torah teaches us how to act, speak, and think in life. Das is was Torah git in a panimis. That's what Torah goes in an inside way, the bread of the Torah. Azoi vidaman, like the manna did. Was men darf does verstehen, because the Torah you have to understand it. Un a rein nemen, and take it inside in a panemius, right? You have to digest the Torah. The ideas have to go into your mind, into your heart, and to understand. You have to understand. Oiv vesen vi as soll sein an haga from him, in order to know what to do. From bnei beso ubanav acharav. In the Torah tells you the definitions. The Torah defines what is a Jew. The Torah defines what is kosher. The Torah defines what is obligatory. You have to do it. The Torah explains what is forbidden, what you have to separate yourself from. Right? The Torah gives you a guide in life. A guide in life. You're supposed to love God. You're supposed to love your fellow man. These are all commandments. So you have to work toward this. Tells you the direction to go. On the other hand, stealing, cheating, lying, right? Doing everything for success, it's against the Torah, but that's human nature, right? So a lot of times you have to defy human nature. That's what the Torah tells you to do. But you have to understand the Torah first. Mitzad dem from this is the Torah, which the Torah is like the man. Zayin and Faran Chilukim, there's different levels between different aspects between different Jews, like food, right? Some people, food, they like this type of food, somebody this type of food. Varum, because Vibal, this is an union from Penimius, because it's an inside thing. Same thing, there's Jews that understand Torah better, there's Jews that understand Torah less. There's different levels of understanding. When Yadarein Lloyd Zain often, that every Jew can understand the Torah according to his way. Just like the same thing as people, right? People. Every person is exactly the same. Every person has a skull and they have arms and legs and toes. But nevertheless, everybody looks different. So that's because it comes from the inside. That's the inside of the person. Like the man. Just like the man, there were differences between what type of bread. There was bread, remember we have learned that Sikha, there were certain tzaddikim, the man would fall right next to their door and it was already prepared. And the evil Jews, the bad Jews, they had to go far outside of the camp and they had to prepare, they had to crush it up and cook it. And the intermediate sort of Jews, there was like at the edge of the camp and all they had to do was just sort of bake it. They didn't have to knead it or crush it. So he says, by the tzaddikim, the bread was prepared, the manna was prepared, and by the Rishonim, by the evil Jews, even though they were all together, right? They all ate from the man, they all benefited from it. Nevertheless, it was different. And that was the man, everyone was different. By the clouds of glory, everyone was the same. And also the bear of Miriam, there weren't any differences. Everybody was surrounded by the clouds, and every single Jew drank water. You have to have water. Nor by them, only by the manna were there differences. Viola, because as is an Indian from Panemius, because the man is something you have to take inside of yourself. It has to be digested internally. It's nourishing. It's for something to be nourishing. It has to be taken and in an internal way. Azoi is the Torah. The same thing with the Torah. The Torah, there are certain people which oibus is nit meglich andrish, or they just don't have the opportunity. They learn Torah a little bit. They just learn one sentence in the morning, one sentence in the evening. And then there's others that they have to learn Torah all the time. The same thing is also in Jews, Yehudim. Noch more, it's even more Faran. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Hidurim. The same thing as Hidurim. Hidurim means to do a mitzvah in a special way. You want to do in an extra special way, the commandment. And even more, for on hidurim was halt thereby is zemechayev. There are certain commandments that if a person is able to do them, he must do them, like putting on 2 pairs of tefillin, etc. All Barodem was the halt nitar by, but the person that they don't have to do it. There's some people that they're just not capable of doing certain commandments. Barum mechve kiyaora. It looks like that you're how do you say you're bragging. You look like you're doing something, special, super. You're super careful about doing things, and you're not at that level at all. So we see that there's the commandments. There are differences in the Torah from each Jew, from one Jew to another, and differences in the commandments in certain ways. Like you said, that just like people look differently, and some people are tall, and some people are short. Good, everybody has the same number of bones and the same number of hearts and lungs, but still everybody looks different. The same thing as the Torah and the commandments. There are certain differences which are between them. That's the aspect of the food of the Torah. But the aspect that protects us of the Torah, that surrounds us, and the water of the Torah, that's common in all Jews. Stam a mensch Torah dam nistan. Un an adam, and an adam chashuv, an important person, is das mechuyev tzatan. A person that's a big Talmud Chacham, whatever, so he has to learn Torah every moment of his life. He can't, just sit around and talk to his friends. He has to. Another person that he can't sit and learn so much. So it's okay if he, what's he going to do? Just sit with an open book and do nothing. So he can talk. He can go out and do other things, right? So everybody is a little bit different in that aspect. When oib net, and if not, is thus an inyan from Chilul Hashem Chas v'Shalom. If a big important person doesn't do a special commandment, let's say his garments are always clean, he wears a long coat, right? He has to have this. It's a necessary thing. If he decides he wants to go outside with short pants on, not nice. The rabbi, he can't do a thing like that. That's not proper. So he has an obligation that he has to look nice, he has to look special. Right? He has an obligation that he has to sit and learn Torah all the time. That's his obligation. Another person not. So we see this is about the Torah and the commandments. The Torah and the commandments, there are certain differences between each and every Jew. That's the thing of Moses. Everyone is different because Moses is the thing of nourishing. He takes the Torah and it's the nourishing aspect of the Torah. So it's different to each and every person. We're going to learn what the idea of the clouds of glory and the water are, God willing, tomorrow. Let's just do the Yom Yom. My grandfather said, a Jewish groan, which comes from physical misfortune, is also like repentance. How much more so if a groan comes from a spiritual thing? And it's lofty. In other words, a person, he loses his wallet. He says, this is accepted by God. It's because it comes from a Jew. So this is a type of repentance. But what about a Jew that he gives a moan because of his spiritual status? Says this is even a higher level of repentance. This groan can take him out. Right? What have I done? How could I waste so much time? This pulls him out of the depth of evil and places him on a firm footing in the realm of good. Just having such a deep regret about your low spiritual state that it comes out as a moan, that also has tremendous value to it. It's not enough, of course. Person just can't keep moaning all the time. You have to change your ways. But nevertheless, taking it to heart is also very valuable to God. Have a good day with Moshiach now. Thank you very much. See you at 3 o'clock, God willing.